Sarah Mitchell had always been different from other children in her small Montana town. Born with a learning disability that made reading and writing incredibly difficult, she struggled through school while teachers whispered about her limitations. At 12 years old, she could barely read simple sentences, and math problems seemed like puzzles with missing pieces. Her classmates would snicker when she stumbled over words during reading time, and more than once she heard adults say she would never learn like other kids. The Mitchell family lived on the edge of town, where the prairies stretched endlessly toward the mountains. Sarah's father worked long hours at the local grain elevator, while her mother cleaned houses for wealthier families. Money was always tight, and there was little time for extra help with Sarah's studies. Her younger brother Tommy seemed to absorb knowledge effortlessly, making Sarah feel even more isolated in her struggles. Every morning, Sarah would walk the dusty road to Clearwater Elementary, her stomach churning with anxiety about what challenges the day would bring. Mrs. Henderson, her fourth-grade teacher, tried to be patient, but Sarah could see the frustration in her eyes when she failed to grasp concepts that came naturally to her peers. The special education resources in their small town were limited, and Sarah often felt forgotten in the back of the classroom. The worst part wasn't the academic struggles. It was the constant reminder that she was different. During parent-teacher conferences, she would overhear hushed conversations about her limitations and realistic expectations. The school counselor suggested she might be better suited for practical skills rather than traditional academics. Each conversation chipped away at her confidence, making her believe that maybe everyone was right about her abilities. At home, Sarah found solace in the wide open spaces surrounding their property. She would spend hours exploring the fields and hills, developing an unusual ability to notice small details others missed. She could spot a hawk circling from incredible distances, track animal movements through the grass, and sense changes in weather patterns long before they arrived. Her father sometimes joked that she had eagle eyes, but these natural talents seemed worthless compared to reading and arithmetic. The loneliness was overwhelming. Sarah had few friends at school, and those who were kind to her often did so out of pity rather than genuine connection. She began to withdraw into herself, spending more time alone and speaking less in class. Her teachers interpreted this as further evidence of her limitations, not recognizing it as a response to constant discouragement. One particularly difficult day, Sarah failed another spelling test, scoring only 3 out of 20 correct answers. As she walked home with tears streaming down her face, she overheard 2 mothers discussing her performance at the school pickup area. "That Mitchell girl will never amount to anything," one said to the other. "It's sad, but some children just aren't meant for learning." The words hit her like physical blows, and she ran the rest of the way home. That evening, Sarah's mother found her crying in her bedroom. When asked what was wrong, Sarah could only whisper, "Everyone says I'm stupid. Maybe they're right." Her mother's heart broke as she held her daughter, knowing that despite all their love and support, the outside world was crushing Sarah's spirit day by day. The family lived near a large ranch owned by the Hendersons, no relation to Sarah's teacher. The property stretched for thousands of acres and was known for its hunting guides and outdoor programs. Sarah often walked along the fence line of the ranch, watching the activities from a distance. She was fascinated by the precision and focus required for the various outdoor skills practiced there, though she never imagined she could be part of that world. As summer approached, Sarah's academic struggles intensified. She was recommended for summer school, another reminder of her failures. The other children would be playing and enjoying their vacation while she sat in a stuffy classroom, trying once again to master skills that seemed impossible. The weight of constant failure was becoming unbearable for someone so young. Her parents worried constantly about her future. Late at night, they would discuss what kind of life Sarah might have if she couldn't master basic academic skills. The conversation always ended with the same uncertain conclusion. They loved her deeply but didn't know how to help her succeed in a world that seemed designed for minds that worked differently than hers. During one of her solitary walks along the ranch property, Sarah noticed a man in military fatigues practicing with a rifle at a distant shooting range. Even from far away, She could see his precise movements and steady concentration. Something about his focused discipline fascinated her, though she had never shown any interest in firearms before. She began timing her walks to catch glimpses of his practice sessions, drawn to the quiet intensity of his routine. The man's name was Colonel James Martinez, a retired Army sniper who worked as a hunting guide for the ranch during his civilian life. He had returned from multiple deployments overseas and was struggling with his own challenges adjusting to civilian life. The ranch work provided him with purpose and a way to use his specialized skills in a peaceful environment. He had noticed the young girl watching his practice sessions from the fence line but hadn't approached her, respecting her distance while curious about her interest. Sarah's fascination with the sniper's precision grew stronger each day. She began to notice patterns in his routine, the way he prepared his equipment and the absolute stillness he maintained before each shot. There was something about his methodical approach that resonated with her, even though she couldn't articulate why. For the first time in her life, she was observing someone whose success seemed to come from patience, focus, and practice rather than natural intellectual ability. As the school year ended with another report card full of disappointing grades, Sarah felt more hopeless than ever. The upcoming summer school felt like a prison sentence, and she couldn't shake the feeling that everyone's predictions about her future were becoming reality. She had no idea that her quiet observations of the sniper would soon change everything about how she saw herself and her potential. The first day of summer school arrived with oppressive heat and Sarah's familiar sense of dread. As she walked past the ranch on her way home from another frustrating morning of struggling with reading comprehension, she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. The sniper was kneeling beside his rifle, but he wasn't shooting. Instead, he was carefully cleaning and examining each component with the same methodical precision she had observed during his practice sessions. Colonel Martinez looked up and noticed the young girl standing by the fence, her school backpack slung over one shoulder, and a defeated expression on her face. Something about her posture and the way she watched his activities with such focused attention intrigued him. After finishing his equipment maintenance, he walked over to the fence line where she stood. "You've been watching me practice," he said gently, not in an accusatory way but with genuine curiosity. Sarah's face flushed red, and she started to back away, mumbling an apology for bothering him. But the colonel held up a hand in a peaceful gesture. "I'm not upset. I'm impressed. Most people can't stay still long enough to observe anything carefully. You've got patience." Sarah had never heard anyone compliment her patience before. In school, teachers constantly urged her to work faster, finish assignments quicker, and keep up with the pace of her classmates. The idea that her natural tendency to move slowly and observe carefully might be a strength rather than a weakness was completely foreign to her. "What's your name?" Colonel Martinez asked. When Sarah quietly introduced herself, he nodded thoughtfully. "I'm James Martinez. I couldn't help but notice you look pretty upset about something. School troubles?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. Something about this stranger's calm, non-judgmental manner made her feel safe enough to share her struggles. "Everyone says I'm stupid," she whispered. "I can't read good and math is too hard. They want me to go to summer school, but I just fail everything anyway." The words tumbled out of her in a rush, months of pent-up frustration and shame finally finding a release. Colonel Martinez listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as she spoke. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that would stick with Sarah for the rest of her life. "Intelligence isn't just about reading and math. I've seen highly educated people make fatal mistakes because they couldn't observe their surroundings or focus under pressure. What you've been doing, watching, learning, staying patient, those are rare gifts." Colonel Martinez explained that during his military service, he had worked with soldiers from all backgrounds and educational levels. Some of the most effective operatives he knew had struggled in traditional school settings, but excelled in real-world applications requiring focus, observation, and steady nerves. "The skills that make someone successful in life," he said, "aren't always the same skills that make someone successful in a classroom." Intrigued by Sarah's obvious intelligence despite her academic struggles, Colonel Martinez made her an offer that would change everything. Would you like to learn something different this summer? Instead of sitting in a stuffy classroom, what if I taught you about marksmanship? It requires the same kind of focus and patience you've already shown me. Sarah was initially hesitant. She had never held a gun before, and the idea seemed far outside anything she had ever considered. But Colonel Martinez explained that marksmanship was as much a mental discipline as a physical skill. It's about controlling your breathing, understanding your environment, and making precise calculations. You might be surprised at how good you are at it. With her parents' cautious permission, Sarah began spending her mornings at the ranch instead of summer school. Colonel Martinez started her training not with firearms, but with observation exercises. He would have her identify objects at various distances, track the movement of wildlife, and estimate measurements using only her eyes. To Sarah's amazement, she excelled at these tasks. "You see things others miss," Colonel Martinez told her after she accurately identified a deer partially hidden in brush that he had struggled to spot. "That's not something you can teach. That's natural talent." For the first time in her life, Sarah heard someone use the words natural talent to describe something she could do. The training gradually progressed to include basic safety protocols and understanding of firearms mechanics. Colonel Martinez discovered that Sarah had an intuitive grasp of spatial relationships and angles that served her well in understanding trajectory and wind compensation. When she struggled to read the technical manuals, he adapted his teaching methods using hands-on demonstrations and visual aids rather than written materials. "Learning happens differently for different people," he explained. "The military taught me that you have to find the right method for each individual. There's no shame in learning differently. There's only shame in giving up." These words contradicted everything Sarah had been told about her limitations and began to reshape her understanding of her own potential. As the weeks progressed, Sarah's confidence grew in ways that extended beyond their training sessions. She began to carry herself differently, speaking up more at home and showing less anxiety about her academic struggles. Her parents noticed the change and were amazed by their daughter's transformation. The girl who had been labeled as someone who would never learn was clearly learning a great deal, just not in the way anyone had expected. Colonel Martinez also found himself changed by the experience of teaching Sarah. Working with her reminded him why he had originally been drawn to military service, the desire to help people discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed. Sarah's determination and progress gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since leaving the Army. The breakthrough moment came during their 4th week of training. Sarah was practicing with a .22 caliber rifle, working on accuracy at a modest distance of 50 yards. She had been improving steadily but hadn't yet achieved the precision that Colonel Martinez knew she was capable of. On this particular afternoon, something clicked. Sarah settled into her shooting position with the same methodical care she had observed in Colonel Martinez's routine. She controlled her breathing exactly as he had taught her, lined up her sight, picture with perfect patience, and squeezed the trigger with steady pressure. The shot hit dead center of the target. "Outstanding," Colonel Martinez exclaimed, but Sarah was already lining up her next shot. She fired again with the same result, then again. By the end of the session, she had achieved a level of accuracy that typically took months of training to develop. Colonel Martinez stared at the target in amazement. This young girl, who had been told she couldn't learn, had just demonstrated exceptional skill in one of the most demanding disciplines he knew. That evening, Sarah ran home with excitement, bubbling over for the first time in years. She had found something she was not just good at, but genuinely exceptional at performing. The discovery would prove to be just the beginning of a journey that would challenge every assumption about her potential and ultimately lead to achievements no one could have imagined. Word of Sarah's remarkable shooting ability spread quickly through their small town. Colonel Martinez couldn't contain his excitement about his students' progress and began telling fellow veterans and ranch visitors about the young girl who had achieved expert-level accuracy in just weeks of training. Some people were skeptical, assuming the stories were exaggerated. But those who witnessed Sarah's demonstrations were left speechless. The local newspaper caught wind of the story and sent a reporter to interview Sarah and Colonel Martinez. The article, titled Local Girl Finds Her Calling featured a photo of Sarah holding Colonel Martinez's rifle with a proud smile. For the first time in her life, Sarah was being recognized for excellence rather than failure. The positive attention felt surreal after years of being known only for her academic struggles. Sarah's newfound confidence began affecting other areas of her life in unexpected ways. While she still struggled with traditional reading, she developed an intense interest in learning everything she could about ballistics, weather patterns, and precision shooting techniques. Colonel Martinez noticed that when the subject matter related to her passion, Sarah could focus for hours and retain complex information that would have seemed impossible for her to grasp just months earlier. Motivation is the key to learning, Colonel Martinez explained to Sarah's parents during one of their conversations about her progress. Sarah isn't lacking intelligence. She was lacking a reason to believe in herself. Now that she's found something that makes sense to her brain, watch how quickly she absorbs new information. The transformation was remarkable. Sarah began asking Colonel Martinez to teach her about military history, specifically focusing on famous snipers and their techniques. She studied maps and topography with the same dedication other children applied to video games. Her visual learning style, which had been a disadvantage in traditional classroom settings, became a tremendous asset in understanding complex spatial relationships and environmental factors. Colonel Martinez decided it was time to enter Sarah in her first competition. The Montana Junior Marksmanship Championship was held annually in Billings, attracting young shooters from across the state. Most participants had been training for years and came from families with strong shooting traditions. Sarah would be competing against teenagers who had been handling firearms since early childhood. The news that 12-year-old Sarah Mitchell would be competing caused quite a stir. Many people questioned whether someone with her academic reputation could possibly succeed in such a demanding competition. Former teachers and classmates expressed doubt, with some suggesting that Colonel Martinez was setting her up for public embarrassment. Sarah's parents were nervous about the competition, but recognized how much their daughter had changed since beginning her training. The girl who used to cry herself to sleep over failed spelling tests now spent evenings confidently discussing wind speed calculations and bullet trajectory. They decided to support her participation, despite their own anxieties about potential disappointment. The weeks leading up to the competition were intense. Colonel Martinez increased the difficulty of Sarah's training, introducing longer distances, varying weather conditions, and different rifle configurations. Sarah rose to meet every challenge, displaying a natural adaptability that impressed even her experienced mentor. She developed an almost intuitive understanding of how environmental factors affected her shots. "I've trained dozens of soldiers," Colonel Martinez confided to Sarah's father, "and I've rarely seen someone with such natural instincts for this discipline. She processes information about wind, distance, and elevation almost instantly. It's like her brain was designed for this kind of calculation, even though she struggles with basic math on paper." As the competition date approached, Sarah's excitement was tempered by familiar anxieties about being judged and potentially failing in front of others. The old fears of public humiliation crept back, reminding her of countless classroom embarrassments. Colonel Martinez sensed her nervousness and spent extra time working on her mental preparation. "Competitions aren't about proving anything to other people," he told her during one of their final practice sessions. "They're about proving something to yourself. You already know what you're capable of. Now you just need to trust your training and let your natural abilities show." The drive to Billings took 3 hours, giving Sarah plenty of time to think about what lay ahead. She had never been away from her small town for a competition before, and the idea of performing in front of strangers felt overwhelming. Colonel Martinez rode with the family, providing steady encouragement and helping Sarah visualize successful shots. When they arrived at the competition venue, Sarah was amazed by the scale of the event. Hundreds of young shooters were practicing on multiple ranges, their equipment cases and team uniforms making Sarah feel underdressed and out of place. Most participants seemed to know each other from previous competitions, and Sarah felt like an outsider in this established community. The technical briefing covered rules and safety protocols that were familiar to most competitors, but new to Sarah. Colonel Martinez stayed close by, helping her navigate the registration process and understand the competition format. Sarah would be competing in the beginners division, but even that category included shooters with years of experience, who had simply aged into higher skill levels. During the practice rounds, Sarah drew attention for all the wrong reasons. Other competitors and their coaches noticed the young girl with the borrowed equipment and whispered among themselves about her prospects. Some were openly skeptical, suggesting that she didn't belong in a serious competition. The criticism felt painfully familiar, triggering memories of classroom ridicule and teacher disappointment. Colonel Martinez recognized the signs of Sarah's anxiety returning and pulled her aside for a private conversation. "Remember why we're here," he said firmly. "Not to impress anyone else, but to show yourself what you can accomplish. Every expert was once a beginner. Every champion started with their first competition." The words resonated with Sarah, reminding her of how far she had already come. Just months earlier, she had been convinced she was incapable of learning anything successfully. Now she was preparing to compete in a state championship, holding her own against opponents who had trained for years. The realization gave her strength and helped settle her nerves. As the official competition began the next morning, Sarah tried to block out the distractions around her and focus on the fundamentals Colonel Martinez had drilled into her. She approached her shooting position with the same methodical preparation she had practiced hundreds of times on the ranch. The familiar routine helped calm her mind and center her attention on the task ahead. The first stage of competition involved precision shooting at 100 yards under controlled conditions. Sarah watched the other competitors in her group, noting their techniques and trying to learn from their approaches. When her turn came, she settled into position, controlled her breathing, and began the sequence that had become second nature to her over the past months. Her first shot hit the 9 ring, just outside the bullseye. It was a solid shot that many beginners would have been proud of, but Sarah knew she was capable of better. She made a small adjustment for wind conditions and fired again. This time, the shot found the center of the target. The range officer marked it as a 10, the highest possible score for that shot. The pattern continued throughout the first stage. Sarah's shots were consistently accurate, earning scores that placed her near the top of the beginners division. Other competitors began taking notice, and some of the earlier skepticism gave way to grudging respect. Colonel Martinez watched with pride as his student demonstrated the skills he had known she possessed all along. By the afternoon of the competition's first day, Sarah had advanced to the elimination rounds, surpassing dozens of more experienced shooters. The buzz around the event centered on the unexpected performance of the young girl from the small Montana town who seemed to improve with each round. Competition officials and spectators gathered to watch her shoot, creating an atmosphere Sarah had never experienced before. The pressure of increased attention could have been overwhelming, but Sarah found herself entering a zone of complete focus that felt natural and comfortable. Colonel Martinez watched from the sidelines as his student demonstrated the kind of mental toughness that separated good shooters from exceptional ones. She wasn't just hitting her targets. She was doing so with a consistency that impressed seasoned competitors and coaches. During a break between rounds, Sarah overheard a conversation between 2 veteran coaches discussing her performance. "That kid has something special," one said to the other. "I've been coaching for 20 years, and I rarely see that kind of natural ability combined with mental discipline. She's processing conditions and making adjustments like someone with decades of experience." The validation from respected experts in the field meant more to Sarah than any grade she had ever received in school. These people understood marksmanship at the highest levels, and they were recognizing genuine talent in her performance. For someone who had spent years being told she lacked ability, their professional acknowledgement felt like vindication of everything Colonel Martinez had been teaching her about different types of intelligence. The competition's second day featured more challenging conditions, including variable wind patterns and longer distances that would test even experienced shooters. Sarah woke up feeling nervous but determined, knowing that she had already exceeded everyone's expectations simply by making it to the advanced rounds. Colonel Martinez spent the morning helping her prepare mentally for the increased difficulty. Today's Conditions will separate the shooters who rely purely on muscle memory from those who can adapt and think critically, he explained. Your ability to read environmental factors and make quick calculations is going to be your advantage. Trust your instincts, and don't overthink the mechanics you've already mastered. The advanced rounds took place at 200 yards with challenging crosswinds that constantly shifted direction and intensity. Many competitors struggled to adjust their techniques quickly enough to compensate for the changing conditions. Sarah, however, seemed to thrive in the complex environment, using her heightened observational skills to track subtle changes in wind patterns that others missed. Her performance during the advanced rounds was nothing short of remarkable. While other shooters posted inconsistent scores as they struggled with the conditions, Sarah maintained her accuracy with shots that consistently hit the center rings of her targets. The scorekeepers began double-checking her results, unable to believe that a relative beginner was outperforming seasoned competitors. Word of Sarah's performance reached beyond the competition venue. Local television news crews arrived to cover the story of the young girl who was defying expectations at the state championship. The media attention was overwhelming for Sarah, but Colonel Martinez helped her navigate the interviews while staying focused on her shooting. "How does it feel to be doing so well when everyone said you couldn't learn?" asked one reporter. Sarah thought carefully before answering, remembering all the teachers and classmates who had dismissed her potential. "I guess I just needed to find the right way to learn," she said simply. "Colonel Martinez taught me that being smart doesn't just mean being good at reading and math." The final round of competition would determine the state champion in each division. Sarah had not only advanced to the finals in the beginners category, but was also invited to compete in the intermediate division due to her exceptional scores. The decision to compete at the higher level was left to her, and after discussing it with Colonel Martinez and her parents, she chose to accept the challenge. Competing in the intermediate division meant facing opponents who had years of experience and access to high-end equipment that far exceeded what Sarah was using. Colonel Martinez's personal rifle, while well-maintained and accurate, was standard military issue rather than the custom competition firearms used by most intermediate-level shooters. The equipment disadvantage didn't deter Sarah. She had learned to maximize the potential of whatever tools were available to her. The intermediate finals featured the most challenging conditions of the entire competition. 300-yard shots with variable lighting and unpredictable wind patterns that required constant adjustment. Sarah watched the first few competitors struggle with the conditions, noting how the wind seemed to shift between shots and how the changing light affected target visibility. When her turn came, Sarah settled into her shooting position with the same calm confidence she had displayed throughout the competition. She took extra time to read the wind conditions, using techniques Colonel Martinez had taught her for gauging air movement at different distances. Her first shot landed just outside the bullseye, a respectable result given the difficult conditions. Rather than feeling disappointed by the near miss, Sarah used the shot as information about the conditions. She made subtle adjustments to her aim point and fired again. This shot hit dead center, earning a perfect score and drawing impressed murmurs from the crowd. The pattern continued throughout her string of shots, with Sarah demonstrating an ability to adapt to changing conditions that impressed even the most experienced observers. As the competition concluded and scores were tallied, Sarah waited nervously with the other finalists. She had no realistic expectations of winning. Simply making it to the intermediate finals was an achievement beyond anything she had imagined when the competition began. Colonel Martinez stood nearby, equally nervous but immensely proud of everything his student had accomplished. The awards ceremony began with the recognition of various category winners and special achievements. Sarah's name was called for several honors, including the award for Most Improved Shooter and Outstanding Sportsmanship. Each recognition felt surreal, representing the first time in her life that she had been publicly celebrated for excellence in any field. When the announcer called for the intermediate division finalists to step forward, Sarah joined 6 other competitors who had earned their way to the championship round. The third-place winner was announced first, followed by the second-place finisher. As the suspense built toward the announcement of the champion, Sarah tried to prepare herself for whatever result awaited. The Montana Junior Marksmanship Championship Intermediate Division winner with a score that would have been competitive in our advanced division, is 12-year-old Sarah Mitchell from Clearwater." The announcement seemed to echo in Sarah's mind as the crowd erupted in applause. She had not only won her division, but had done so with scores that impressed seasoned competitors and officials. Colonel Martinez rushed forward to congratulate his student, his own eyes filled with tears of pride and vindication. The young girl, who had been written off as someone who would never learn, had just won a state championship through dedication, natural talent, and the right kind of teaching. The moment represented a complete transformation of how Sarah saw herself and her potential. As Sarah held her trophy and posed for photographs with Colonel Martinez, she thought about all the people who had doubted her abilities over the years. The victory wasn't just about marksmanship. It was proof that intelligence comes in many forms, and that everyone deserves the chance to discover their unique talents. The girl everyone said would never learn had just learned something extraordinary about herself. The news of Sarah's championship victory spread like wildfire through her hometown and beyond. The girl who had been quietly dismissed by teachers and classmates was suddenly the subject of newspaper articles, television interviews, and social media posts celebrating her remarkable achievement. The contrast between her previous reputation and her current success created a powerful story that resonated with people facing their own challenges and limitations. Return to Clearwater Elementary brought a reception Sarah could never have imagined. The same hallways where she had once walked in shame were now decorated with banners celebrating her championship. Teachers who had previously written her off as a slow learner suddenly wanted to hear about her training methods and competitive experiences. The transformation in how others perceived her was dramatic, but even more significant was how Sarah now perceived herself. Mrs. Henderson, her former fourth-grade teacher, approached Sarah during the school celebration with tears in her eyes. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I failed to recognize your potential and may have contributed to your struggles. Your success has taught me more about different learning styles than all my education courses combined." The conversation was healing for both of them, representing a new understanding of how diverse intelligence can be. Colonel Martinez decided that Sarah's success warranted sharing his most prized possession, his personal sniper rifle from his military service. The weapon had accompanied him through multiple deployments and represented not just a tool of his trade, but a symbol of precision, discipline, and dedication. The decision to give it to Sarah was not made lightly and carried deep emotional significance for the veteran. "This rifle has been with me through some of the most challenging moments of my life," Colonel Martinez explained as he presented the weapon to Sarah in a private ceremony at the ranch. "It represents everything I've learned about focus, patience, and never giving up when others doubt your abilities. I can't think of anyone who better embodies those qualities than you do." The gift came with responsibilities that Sarah understood and accepted seriously. Colonel Martinez explained the rifle's history, its capabilities, and the respect it commanded. "This isn't just about shooting accurately," he said. "It's about carrying forward the values of discipline and excellence that this rifle represents. You've proven you understand those values better than most adults I know." Sarah's success opened doors that had previously seemed impossible. College recruiters began contacting her family, offering scholarships based on her marksmanship abilities. Military academies expressed interest in her potential as a future officer candidate. Sports shooting sponsors wanted to provide equipment and training opportunities. The girl who had been told she had no future was suddenly faced with more opportunities than she could have dreamed of. The academic world also began to take notice of Sarah's story from a different perspective. Educational researchers became interested in her case as an example of how traditional learning assessments can fail to identify student potential. Several universities invited her to participate in studies about alternative intelligence and learning styles, recognizing her as evidence that academic success can take many different forms. Sarah's relationship with traditional academics began to change as well. While she still struggled with conventional reading and math assignments, her confidence from marksmanship success gave her courage to ask for help and advocate for herself in ways she had never done before. Teachers, now aware of her proven ability to learn complex skills, began adapting their methods to work with her learning style rather than against it. The most significant change was in Sarah's own mindset about learning and intelligence. She began to understand that her struggles with traditional academics didn't reflect a lack of intelligence, but rather a mismatch between her learning style and conventional teaching methods. This realization freed her from years of shame and self-doubt, allowing her to approach challenges with confidence rather than defeat. Colonel Martinez continued working with Sarah, but their relationship evolved from teacher and student to mentor and protege. He began sharing more advanced concepts about ballistics, meteorology, and precision shooting that required complex mathematical calculations. Sarah discovered that when math was applied to something she cared about, she could master concepts that had seemed impossible in abstract classroom settings. The military background of Colonel Martinez provided Sarah with exposure to leadership principles and strategic thinking that complemented her technical skills. She learned about teamwork, mission planning, and the mental discipline required for high-pressure situations. These lessons prepared her for competitive shooting at national and international levels, while also developing life skills that would serve her well in any career path. Sarah's story began attracting attention from disability rights advocates and educational reform supporters who saw her success as evidence of the need for more diverse approaches to measuring and developing student potential. Her experience became a case study in how students with learning differences can excel when given appropriate opportunities and support. The transformation of Sarah's reputation in her hometown was complete, but more importantly, she had transformed her own understanding of her capabilities and worth. The girl who had once believed she was destined for failure now saw challenges as opportunities to prove herself. Her approach to obstacles changed from resignation to determination, and this shift in mindset affected every aspect of her life. As word of her story continued to spread, Sarah began receiving letters from other young people facing similar struggles with traditional education. Parents of children with learning disabilities contacted her family seeking advice and hope. Sarah realized that her success carried responsibilities beyond her own achievements. She had become an inspiration and role model for others facing similar challenges. The rifle Colonel Martinez had given her became more than just a shooting instrument. It was a symbol of the potential that exists within everyone, waiting for the right opportunity to be discovered and developed. Sarah understood the significance of the gift and the trust it represented, vowing to honor both the weapon and the man who had believed in her when no one else would. The partnership between Sarah and Colonel Martinez had evolved into something neither had expected when they first met at the ranch fence line. What began as an attempt to help a struggling child had become a transformative experience that proved the power of believing in someone's potential and providing them with the right kind of support and encouragement. As Sarah prepared for her next level of competition and continued her journey of discovery, she carried with her not just the skills Colonel Martinez had taught her, but also his gift of a rifle that represented excellence, discipline, and the belief that anyone can achieve greatness when given the proper opportunity and support. The Tapani weapon in her hands was a tangible reminder that she was no longer the girl everyone said would never learn. She had become someone who could teach others about the true meaning of intelligence and determination. 3 years after receiving Colonel Martinez's rifle, Sarah had become one of the most successful junior competitive shooters in the country. Her trophy case overflowed with awards from national championships, and her story had been featured in major magazines and documentaries about overcoming adversity. But the most significant changes were not measured in trophies or media coverage. They were seen in the confident young woman she had become and the lives she had touched along the way. Sarah's academic journey had transformed dramatically as, well, with the confidence gained from her shooting success, she had learned to advocate for herself in school and seek out teachers who understood different learning styles. Her grades improved not because her learning disability disappeared, but because she found educators willing to adapt their methods to work with her strengths rather than focus on her weaknesses. The partnership between Sarah and Colonel Martinez had evolved into a comprehensive mentoring program they established together. The Second Chance Ranch program brought together young people who struggled in traditional educational settings with military veterans who could teach them alternative skills and help them discover hidden talents. Sarah served as both a success story and an active mentor, working with children who reminded her of her former self. The program attracted national attention from educators, policymakers, and mental health professionals who recognized its potential to help students who had been left behind by conventional educational approaches. Sarah's role in the program went beyond teaching marksmanship. She became a living example that intelligence comes in many forms and that every person has unique capabilities waiting to be discovered. Colonel Martinez watched with pride as Sarah grew into a leader and advocate for alternative education. The shy, defeated girl he had first met at the fence line had become a confident young woman who spoke at educational conferences and testified before legislative committees about the need for diverse approaches to measuring student potential. Her transformation was complete, but more importantly, she was helping others achieve similar transformations. The rifle Colonel Martinez had given her remained Sarah's most treasured possession, but it had evolved from a symbol of personal achievement to a tool for empowering others. Sarah used it to teach new students in their program, passing along not just the technical skills of marksmanship, but the deeper lessons about patience, focus, and self-belief that had changed her life. Each successful student represented another victory over the narrow definitions of intelligence that had once limited her own potential. Sarah's story reached international audiences when she was invited to compete in the World Junior Championships. Representing the United States on the international stage was an honor that would have been unimaginable during her struggles in elementary school. Standing on the medal podium with her country's flag rising behind her, Sarah thought about all the children around the world who were being told they would never learn, and hoped her success might inspire them to keep searching for their own unique talents. The impact of Sarah's journey extended far beyond competitive shooting. Educational institutions began implementing programs inspired by her story, creating alternative pathways for students with learning differences. Military veterans found new purpose in mentoring roles that utilized their skills while helping young people discover their potential. The collaboration between Sarah and Colonel Martinez had sparked a movement that was changing lives across the country. As Sarah prepared to graduate from high school with offers from multiple colleges interested in her unique combination of competitive achievement and advocacy work, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The girl who had once cried herself to sleep over failed spelling tests was now being recruited by universities that recognized her leadership potential and her ability to inspire others facing similar challenges. Colonel Martinez had become more than a mentor to Sarah. He had become like a grandfather, taking immense pride in her achievements while continuing to guide her toward even greater purposes. Their relationship demonstrated the power of one person believing in another's potential, even when that potential is hidden beneath layers of discouragement and misdirected efforts. The ranch where Sarah had first discovered her abilities had become a pilgrimage site for families dealing with learning disabilities and educational challenges. Parents brought their struggling children to meet Sarah and learn about alternative approaches to education and personal development. Each visit reinforced Sarah's understanding that her success carried responsibilities to help others find their own paths to achievement. Sarah's academic struggles never completely disappeared, but they no longer defined her or limited her aspirations. She had learned to work with her learning differences rather than against them, using technology and alternative methods to access information while focusing her energy on areas where her natural talents could flourish. Her story proved that success is not about overcoming disabilities, but about finding ways to work with them effectively. The rifle that symbolized Sarah's transformation had become famous in its own right, featured in museums and exhibitions about American ingenuity and the power of mentorship. But for Sarah, it remained a reminder of the moment when someone first believed in her potential and gave her the tools to discover her own capabilities. The weapon represented not just marksmanship excellence, but the broader principle that everyone deserves a chance to find and develop their unique talents. As Sarah looked toward her future, she carried with her the lessons learned from Colonel Martinez about discipline, perseverance, and the importance of believing in others. Whether she pursued competitive shooting, education, advocacy work, or any other path, she would always remember that her greatest achievement was not winning championships, but discovering that the girl everyone said would never learn had actually learned the most important lesson of all: that every person has untapped potential waiting for the right opportunity and the right mentor to help it flourish. The story that began with a defeated child watching a sniper practice at a fence line had evolved into a testament to the transformative power of believing in human potential. Sarah Mitchell, once written off as a failure, had become proof that intelligence cannot be measured by traditional standards alone, and that with the right support, anyone can achieve remarkable things. Her journey from academic failure to national champion served as inspiration for countless others who needed to hear that their struggles did not define their potential. Colonel Martinez's decision to share his rifle with Sarah had created ripple effects that extended far beyond their original mentor-student relationship. Together, they had built something larger than either could have achieved alone. A legacy of second chances, alternative education, and the unwavering belief that every person deserves the opportunity to discover their unique gifts. The rifle remained a symbol of that legacy, representing the moment when someone chose to invest in potential, rather than focus on limitations, changing 2 lives and ultimately touching thousands of others in the process.